Please join with me in a spirit of prayer. Gracious God, may the light of your love shine upon us, in us, and through us in this time of worship. May our spirits ignite with hope, joy, and renewed commitment to share your love and light with all we meet. Amen. Many of the biblical texts talk about wisdom. There are entire books that are classified as wisdom literature, including the books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. The Wisdom of Solomon is an apocryphal book that you may or may not be familiar with that was named after King Solomon in ancient Israel, who was known for his wisdom. So wisdom is lifted up as a virtue that can and should be pursued in this life. And often in these texts, wisdom is contrasted with foolishness, as is the case in today's parable, or pre-parable, as I'm now going to call it forever. I do like that. Also like the cell phone charger. Thought of that one too. We're on some weird wavelength, Dave. Jesus, of course, was a teacher of wisdom. He knew the wisdom literature that was part of his own Jewish tradition, and he carried forth this call to be wise. So here we have this parable with these 10 bridesmaids. They were young, unmarried women who had an important job in the wedding celebration. Their job was to meet the groom at a designated location. Once he arrived, they would escort him to the bride's house to pick her up. Then they would escort the happy couple to the home where the wedding ceremony and the banquet would take place. So their first job was to wait. And as it seems that this was an evening wedding, they take their lamps with them to go meet the groom. 5 of them, as you know, wisely bring extra flasks of oil for their lamps, and 5 of them foolishly do not. And so they wait for the groom. One of my college professors wisely taught us not to try to solve parables, not to try to rush too quickly to an interpretation that is beyond the text. Now, yes, the historical context is important. Yes, the theological messages are important. And yes, there are some interpretations that may be better than others or may be more relevant than others. And we can get to that eventually. But he encouraged us to always first sit with the parable as a story. Hear and absorb it at its story level. Pay attention to what it does to us, because parables are intended to do something. Listen for what reactions and feelings arise in us when we hear this story. So I'm going to be real honest. One of the things that this parable does to me is annoy me. This groom is late. I have been a bride. I've been a bridesmaid. I have officiated several weddings. When a member of the wedding party is late, it stresses everyone out. I've never had a really, really late groom, though I did once have a co-officiant who showed up halfway through the ceremony. Yeah, because we finally, after some time and some tears, decided to start without him. I think, Jill, you probably remember that one, don't you? Yeah. So here we have this groom. He is late. Not just a little late, this dude is really late. I guarantee you that this wedding was supposed to start long before midnight. So, another feeling that arises is compassion for these bridesmaids. They wait so long into the night for this guy to show up that they fall asleep. Who can blame them, really? So finally, they are startled awake from their slumber when he arrives, and it's time to light up the lamps and get this show on the road. But of course, half of them have now run out of oil. So I also have sympathy for those bridesmaids that ran out. They really weren't planning on being there quite so long, were they? Now, we might be inclined to think that the bridesmaids who did bring extra oil are being a bit stingy and not sharing with the others. It seems like maybe they're being a little mean, a little bit like, told you so, should have brought some more oil. Should have charged up your phone. But this story implies that they're actually just being a little practical. There simply isn't enough oil to go around. Not if their lamps are going to stay lit for the rest of the wedding festivities. Because again, we've got a wedding starting at midnight. It's a long time till dawn, so we've got an all-night party about to begin. So those who have run out must go find some oil. They must go buy some oil. And apparently there is an olive oil mini mart or something that's open all night long because they're successful. They are able to go to the merchant and buy some oil. But unfortunately, as you know, by the time they return, the groom and the other bridesmaids have already gone off to the wedding banquet. And when they finally get there to join them, they find the door shut and locked tight. And so, the parable ends with this unsettling and harsh encounter as the bridesmaids beg to be let in, but the groom responds, "I don't know you." What? After all he put them through, he isn't going to let them in now? What do we do with this ending? Now, sure, they were not as wisely prepared as the Boy Scout bridesmaids. But they fixed the problem, they got some oil, and now they're there and ready to join the party. So where's the mercy? Where's the forgiveness? Where's the apology for making them wait so long in the first place? I have to admit, this parable kind of infuriates me. And you know, I wonder if that was part of the intention. Often Jesus' parables and teachings have some kind of twist, something unexpected, something that's intended to shock or wake us up a bit, make us pay attention. Keep awake, therefore, for you don't know the day or the hour. You know, images of wedding banquets and feasts are used throughout the Bible to illustrate the fulfillment of the reign of God, that hopeful vision of heaven on earth, a peaceful, just, and joyful celebration where all are welcomed, all are fed, and all have a place at the table. And like those poor bridesmaids who had to wait so long into the night, we are still waiting for this vision to become a full reality. It can feel like we're still waiting to even just get a little bit closer to this vision. In the midst of so much war and struggle and strife, a hopeful future can feel so far away. I think Jesus' followers felt this way too. They knew that waiting was hard. And so one of the messages of this parable is that waiting is necessary sometimes, even though it really annoys me. It may be out of our control, frankly. So the question then becomes, how do we wait well? How do we wait wisely? So if this story is urging us to be wise rather than foolish, how do we do that? Well, I guess one of the ways we do is we have to first stock up on oil for our lamps. We have to keep enough at the ready so we can keep our lamps lit even in the darkest night. So I guess we ought to learn something from those wise Boy Scout bridesmaids and fill up our flasks and take them with us wherever we go, so we always have enough to last the night. So even when life's challenges don't go our way or don't get resolved on our timeline, we can still refill, we can still refuel, and we can keep our lamp lit. So my question for you is, what is your oil? What's your cell phone battery? What fuels you? What fuels you spiritually, physically, mentally, in all dimensions of your life? What do you need to keep your light shining bright? What brings you hope? What restores you when you are feeling weary? Remember, our bridesmaids fell asleep, right? They were waiting so long that they fell asleep. We all need restoration when we're weary. What inspires you? What gives you a sense of purpose? What gives you a reason to get up in the morning? And what gives you the strength and endurance to get through your day, even when that involves doing difficult things? The good news is that God is in the fuel business and has plenty in stock. You don't have to run at the last minute to the midnight mini mart with your flask. Stock up now and you can return anytime. The warehouse store is open and you can get a giant jug. The large and inconvenient size, as my mother-in-law likes to say. There's plenty of fuel to go around, but we have to go to the source. I think that's one of the messages of this parable too, is that yes, we can share fuel, but there comes a time when we all have to ground ourselves in the source. So soak it up. Soak up God's abundant and steadfast love like a wick soaks up oil, so you can keep your light shining bright. Because we need your light. When the foolish bridesmaids ran out of fuel, they missed the opportunity to be a part of the wedding party. They missed their moment. The wise bridesmaids realized that their role was essential, that they weren't just standing on the sidelines, actually, but they were there to do important work. The important work of lighting the way and ushering this celebration into being. So they prepared for this role, no matter how long it might take. And this story isn't just about waiting for a brighter future down the road. It's also about being attentive to the present moment. It's about being prepared, being ready, and being willing to respond to today's opportunities and challenges with love. It's about how we tend to the light now in an effort to both make a difference in this moment, in this world around us, in this life, and to nurture a brighter future. But in order to do that, we have to keep enough fuel to keep going. And we have to keep our eyes peeled for those glimpses of God's kingdom in our midst, those God winks that Dave was talking about. So that when an opportunity presents itself to help usher in more love, usher in more peace, more hope, we can jump into action, bridesmaids. We're all bridesmaids. And we can trim our lamps, light our lamps, and help lead the way. And the light of love is needed right now in so many ways, isn't it? So where and how are you called to shine? How will you tend to the light this day, this week, this year? If you need some ideas, Jesus gave us some good ones. He fed people. He saw to their healing and well-being. He stood with those on the margins. He challenged the status quo when it needed to be changed for the better. He was unafraid of looking foolish to the powerful, which I think tells us something about true wisdom. And he taught anyone who would listen that they were loved and that they had love to give. We know from experience that this work of tending to the light can be rewarding and life-giving. Some of that itself is our fuel, I think. And it can also be challenging at times. Part of the wisdom of preparation is that it encourages us to build up the stores of faith and love to keep going in those tougher times. We must, for example, tap into our spiritual reserves so that we can persist in peacemaking, even when it's difficult. Because we are called to be peacemakers, but we all know that's really hard work. When peace is so often delayed, when hostility and violence flare up in our world, when it can feel like maybe there has been some kind of progress over the course of human history, but then something blows up and we feel like we've fallen back to square one again. Being a peacemaker for years, for decades, for a lifetime can be deeply demanding. And yet there are people who persist in seeking peace. There are people who have dedicated their lives to peacemaking in conflict zones because their lives depend upon it, and their understanding of love and human dignity demands it. After this latest war began in Israel and Gaza, I learned about a peacemaking organization called Roots that is based in the West Bank. It is a collaborative effort made up of both Israeli and Palestinian peace activists. On October 15th, they held the first of a couple of virtual presentations about how they were persisting in being peacemakers in a time of war. The Israeli founder, Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, and one of his Palestinian colleagues, Nora Wad, both spoke. And one of the things that struck me is that they were honest. They were honest about the difficulties they faced. They shared their profound heartbreak and grief and worry. They shared their concerns about the future of their people and their homeland, a land that they believe belongs to both peoples. And they candidly shared that there were some disagreements and some challenges among their own leaders within their organization about what the best way forward was. And yet, they also shared how they are not giving up on peace. Not at this time, not ever. They know that peacemaking is a long, long process. They have been living it for years. They have made it their life's work. And they have found their particular niche. Though they have a vision and ideas for a political solution, their primary mission is to foster, quote, a grassroots movement of understanding, nonviolence, and transformation among Israelis and Palestinians. Understanding, nonviolence, and transformation. They pursue this primarily by bringing people together for dialogue to really listen and really hear each other's stories, and to build trusting relationships over time. Those conversations are not easy. This is hard work. They believe that any political solution, however, will only be possible and sustainable if there is work done on a people-to-people level. And I was actually really surprised to learn about the breadth of the political spectrum of people that they have succeeded in bringing into conversation with one another. It's actually really pretty remarkable. And it is deeply hard and deeply holy work that they are doing, in my opinion. Since this latest violence erupted, they have had to pivot to meeting on Zoom instead of meeting in person because of the various security blockades that Israel has enacted in the West Bank. But they are still meeting. Isn't it great that everybody knows how to Zoom now? And as the West Bank has also become more volatile in these recent weeks, they have been reaching out to their various colleagues and those who participated in their programs over the years and urged them to be voices of calm, voices of de-escalation, and voices of nonviolence within their own small communities. They have also been providing food and medications and other essentials to Palestinians who are blockaded within the West Bank, most of whom are unable to leave home and unable to work and may not have any sort of savings or backup plan, as well as to Israelis who have been displaced from the south as a result of the recent conflict. So they're doing those things, that feeding, that loving, that caring, even in the midst of this trying time. And they've been calling upon their community members, and indeed anyone who will listen, to reject hate at every level, and to model respect and care for all persons in the way that they talk and the way that they post on social media about this conflict. Despite the extreme difficulties in this moment in history, they are still pursuing their mission of peacekeeping. So I think they must have a lot of oil in their reserves, frankly, to keep their lamps lit in this time. But I find it inspiring and I find it encouraging. And it's one of those things that's given me a bit of fuel in the midst of feeling like, what can I do? Well, I could donate to them. I'll do that. That's one thing. I can keep pursuing peace in my little spheres of influence. I can commit to doing that. I think that is what we are called to do, each in our own way, and it's a constant discernment process, isn't it? So I want to encourage you today to keep continuing to build up the spiritual reserves you need to tend to the light, to keep your lamp lit. Keep it burning with a flame that no wind, no war, no force of death and destruction can blow out. And maybe in doing so, we'll edge this world just a little closer to that great banquet, that great wedding feast, where all are welcome, all are fed, and all are at peace. Amen.